Got some notes today. So we've already done one of these. A nested for loop is a loop inside of a loop. So that could be called nested iteration to make it sound really complicated, but also just a nested for loop or a loop inside of a loop. So when you have a loop inside of another loop, the inner one, it finishes completely before the next outer one goes. So like say the outer one has I equals 5. Then there's an inner one. It's going to do whatever it's going to do, its whole thing. And then it'll go back up and I will be 6. And then, so the outer loop, the inner loop has to finish its whole run before you go to the next outer loop. They're not like happening at the same time. They're not both changing at the same time. It's all very in order. So I'll show you an example. Let's look at this. This has got a for loop where I is going from 0 to 4 and j is going from 0 to 2. And it's just printing a star without a new line. So see if you can look at that code and figure out how many stars are going to get printed. Don't say it out loud. And the answer is 15 stars. That's because this outer loop is going to run 5 times, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And the inner loop is going to run 3 times, 0, 1, 2. 5 times 3 is 15. I mean, it's literally, you can just multiply that one. There's not a lot of monkey business going on here. Here's another example. Instead of stars, I'm printing I in there. So same loop though. So we're going to get 15 things printed. Cameron? It's not 15, see, because I is not in quotes, so it's not going to print the letter I. It's going to print this thing. So the question, so when I is 0, then it's going to come in here and do 3 things. It's going to print I 3 times. So I think it's going to print 3 zeros, then 3 ones, then 3 twos. Let's see. I did write it out this time. I didn't do 15 stars before because, I could just say 15 stars. But so I is 0, and then it comes in here, and it's going to print. It's going to do this inner loop 3 times. And we're not using J to print, but J is what's making me get 3 zeros and then 3 ones. And if it would help you, you could copy this out of the slide deck later and put it in a REPL and change this to like a 4 or change this to a 1 and, see what it does. Put a J here. That'd be an interesting thing. What would happen if we put J here? I think we would get 0, 1, 2, 0, 1, 2, 0, 1, 2, 0, 1, 2, 0, 1, 2, just over and over again. Because if it wasn't printing I, then it would be printing J. And hopefully I didn't just give away. No. I was like, that could have been my next example. So here's a slightly different thing. Notice now I'm saying J less than I. So listen, I'd recommend you get out a piece of paper and figure this out. These aren't supposed to be like, oh, I'm going to do them in my head. All of them. I mean, some of them are easy. I'm getting a piece of paper to model good behavior. And a way to figure this sort of problem out is to say, what are all my I possibilities? In this case, I goes from, so I's will be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then J, when I is 0, J is 0. And we're going to do the inside as long as J is less than I. So it's not going to even be there the first time, right? So when I is 0, no J's. We're not going to run the inner loop. So then when I is 1, J will happen once, right? We'll have the, J will be 0. I'll just say J 0. There's not like some awesome format to do this, but like on paper, I might do I 0 and then say nothing, and then J1, I1, J1. You could draw a little tree of things. Let's see what it does. So yeah, it didn't print any zeros, right? But when I was 1, we did this inner loop once, because remember, this is j less than 1, j starting at 0. And then when j is 2, I is 2, then j is going to be 0 and 1, so it's going to print I twice. I mean, this is all so multi-level, because you get the I here. It'd be totally different if we had a j here or a star here, But anyway, this is what happens with this one. Questions? Again, you could copy this code and play with it. This one is putting a space. Notice this thing is printing a space every time the inner loop finishes. So that kind of is a helpful delineation. Like, okay, we're going to do the inner loop completely, then we're going to do a space. That's how it comes as a space between the 1s and the 2s and between the 2s and the 3s. So I say, how do you figure these out? I recommend getting a piece of paper out and diagramming it. Figure out all the possible values of the outer loop, and then see what's happening on the inner loop. And then sometimes you can see a pattern and go, okay, I see what's happening. Sometimes you kind of have to do the whole thing. So there'll be multiple choice questions like this on the AP test. So here's another one. This time I is starting at 1, and as long as I is less than 3. And then inside, j starts out as I, and we keep going as long as j is greater than or equal to 0, going down 1 each time. So I'd like someone to tell me what this is, but just figure it out first. I don't remember what it is, so I'm going to figure it out. It would warm my heart to see some people with pencils in their hands, but if you need to just... I mean, literally, you should practice doing this on paper rather than like, oh, I can do this in my head. I mean, awesome. If you can get them all right, doing them in your head, that's great. A lot of people, that's not something that's going to happen. Anyone want to say what's going to be printed? Quincy.
Yes. Is it 1 1 space 2 2 2 space?
That's what I think. Yep. So I will be 1 and then 2. So when I is 1, j will be 1 and 0. And then when I is 2, j will be 2, 1, 0. But remember, we're printing I, not j. So what this basically means is the inner loop repeats twice when I is 1, printing I 1, 1. And it repeats 3 times when I is 2. So we get 2, 2, 2, and the space at the end. Nice touch. And then I wanted to remind you about the times tables. This is the one we did the other day that I just showed you, but we didn't call it nested for loops. But this has I going 1 to 4, j going 1 to 4, and we're printing I times j and then a tab. So this is just times tables with a typo on this one. This had to be ln. It's like, how could that have been different? Because it's the same. Anyway, this prints 1 times 1, 1 times 2, 1 times 3, and so on. The diagonal is 1, 2, 1 squared, 2 squared, 3 squared, 4 squared. Anyway, this doesn't look like times tables, but it is. 4 times 3 is 12. All right. Well, I've got an assignment for you. Any questions before I